Very delightful morning and welcome to Rise and Shine. It's a Thursday edition. We're super excited as always to be here with you. I do hope your morning is going great and you had a refreshing night rest. Of course, my name is Francis Oyima Adet. Glad to welcome you on board today's conversation. As always, we will be taking you around the latest happenings across Nigeria, particularly stories that have a variety of options to affect our collective growth and development as a people. Of course, we'll always encourage you to be part of our online community so you don't miss out on any of our content, all of which you can find across our social media platform, spectrumtvlive.ng. And today is another interesting day with lots of activities and lots of happenings across the nation. Of course, a plethora of stories that we will be looking at this morning. But I do hope you're ready. So if you're en route to your office, safe journey down. If you're already seated in your office, congratulations. If you're still, trying to get out of bed, I wonder if there are people like that anyways. But either ways, whatever it is you're doing, we're right here and we're going to take you through.
Good morning, Africa. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, Akwa Ibom State. Beautiful Thursday morning it is. My name is Uyai Anyeka, and thankful to be here this morning to talk about the things that affect our collective growth. It's Nigeria, it's our country. We are all on a journey of a renewed hope. Just yesterday I saw somewhere that before hope rises, there seems to be some form of difficulty. Just maybe Nigeria is experiencing her birth pangs, just to be able to give birth to a new nation economically, financially and otherwise. We do hope that the people at the helms of our affairs will not plunder us once we have given birth once again. But of course, it's rise and shine, like Francis said. Take advantage of all our social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrumtvlive.ng. We also have phone lines displayed on the screen in the course of the program. Feel free to send us WhatsApp messages, and if we throw it open for phone calls, please also feel free to call us. And let's get your contributions on the issues that will be raised this morning. A quick rundown of some of the issues that we have on the front burner for Rise and Shine today. Currency crisis still seems to be a strong conversation, and we also see that Naira falls by 17% to 951 Naira per dollar, and that's where we are right now where the Naira is concerned. We also see economic projections. Budget Office says IMF wrong about Nigeria's data. We haven't even done our census yet. Of course, we are going to be working with estimated data to be able to get any kinds of word out there. So, but of course, IMF is saying that the IMF is wrong about Nigeria's data. IPPIS malfunctioning. Of course, we're still talking about salaries to be paid workers of the federal government. Now they're saying that the IPPS is malfunctioning. We are heading on to the second week in the month of December. Salaries haven't been paid yet. We also see lawlessness, a big issue where Senate gives Kyari NUPRC boss 24 hours to appear for budget defense. This budget is meant to be accented to before the 31st of December. If some agency heads are, not agreeing to come on time for their budget defense, maybe we shouldn't just give their agency any kinds of allocation. Well, FCT leadership still big conversation. Of course, protesters asked Tinubu to remove Wike as minister. Well, it might actually come to this because there's a lot of uproar where Nyesom Wike is concerned in the FCT. But some people are of the opinion that he might actually be doing some good work. We'll get into the detail of that sometime later this morning. We see that the federal government intends to spend 138 million naira to tackle fake news trend in the country. I wonder how they're going to use money to, attack fake news. We'll get into the detail of that also this morning. Of course, Senate blasts NPA, NCS over $1.68 billion revenue loss. Okay, minimum wage. Nigeria Labour Congress vows new agreement must reflect economic realities. Of course, these and more are some of the conversations we'll have with you on Rise and Shine this morning. Buckle your seatbelt. Remind someone, like, share, comment. Let more people know that we are up and Rise and Shine this morning to talk about the very social-oriented stories that affect the collective growth of Nigerians. At this point, we head on straight to our flash news.
Rise and Shine.
Rise and Shine.
Of course, on the very first flash news this morning, we're seeing that the data has shown that the Naira again has appreciated a little bit on the official market, dropping by 17% to about 951 Naira per dollar. Of course, still talking about the appreciation, as far as Nigeria has been concerned, the high rise of dollar and the disparity between the Naira and the dollar has been a major concern. Literally, the manufacturing sector has been screaming of the inadequacies and the inability of manufacturers in the country to be able to gain, some level of profits as a result of the high disparity between the Naira and the dollar. And of course, seeing this drop by 17% is for the press. We see that the exchange revealed that the Naira lost 144.949 Naira against the dollar after closing trading as at Tuesday at 806.73 Naira per dollar. Of course, it opened trading on Wednesday at 828 again and dropped a day before that. A day before that, it was at high as 1,159 Naira 10 kobo per dollar. Now it's dropped to about 701 Naira per dollar. That's about a few moments ago as far as the Nigerian exchange market is concerned. So we are looking at a fluctuation between 900 to 701 Naira per dollar. Of course, these are welcome development, pushing us forward to what the federal government is attempting to do. Remember, the benchmark for the 2024 appropriation bill, it's placed at about 700 to 750 Naira per dollar, and other indices that the federal government has used for the 2024 appropriation bill. So this is a good news, especially coming towards the end of the year. It makes Nigerians feel there is a possibility of the dollar bouncing or the Naira bouncing back as we head on to the year 2024.
Well, when the dollar is bouncing back to 951, 700, plus Naira thereabout, there's actually nothing to rejoice about. We came all the way from 400 to where we are. Once upon a time, we were trading at about 144 Naira, 200 Naira against the dollar. Where it stands, there is nothing to celebrate about, because the differential value in the marketplace is still going to be about the same margin. Anything that is imported in the country is still going to be expensive, because the difference of 100 Naira, 200 Naira per, against the dollar is not really going to have any kind of effect. So if we see them working assiduously to make sure that the dollar the Naira per dollar ratio races back all the way to maybe somewhere 200 Naira per dollar, then that's when we'll be talking business. If they even find a way to say, okay, let's even go back to what it was before the May 29th, somewhere around 400, 500 Naira, linger around there, it would be manageable. But when we are having this conversation around, 700, 900 Naira, there's really nothing to celebrate about at this point. It's just fingers crossed. And like he said, it's dwindling. It's doing a dance between that 700, 900, all the way back to 100, to 1,000 plus. What are the indices that is making this, currency to fluctuate this way? So it's more like there's still lots of work to be done. Personally, I'm not, and I'll imagine that on the part of most Nigerians, there's really nothing to celebrate about this. Of course, it's a volatile market. The behavior of the Naira in the market is showing a lot of volatility, and it needs to, be stabilized. At this point, it's not stabilized. You can literally buy something, at what now, 951 Naira per dollar today. By the time you go back to buy it tomorrow, it's selling at about 1,000. So it's the higgy haga that it's coming with, Francis, is not giving anybody, any kind of economic rest at this time. But we see, of course, that for now, the foreign reserves are continuing to fall. It has fallen by $1.6 billion to $32.97 billion, I beg your pardon, since, of course, the CBN tried to unify the country's foreign exchange rate, putting pressure on the Naira. So we still also see that this comes back to policy conversations with the Central Bank of Nigeria. More like Kadaso needs to go back to read the books on the CBN, policies that they have made, review it, and let's hope that by the time we get into 2024, there's going to be a lot more policy reviews that will favor Nigerians.
Well, we do hope a lot, but however you see it, 100 naira extra, 200 naira extra means a lot for most Nigerians and for most people, and it would go a long way, to change the narrative in terms of how much people, manufacturers, use to import raw materials into the country, or importers of other products. But we move away from the CBN and the naira falling, or trying to appreciate to another flash news this morning, where the Director General of the Budget Office of the Federation, Ben Akabweze, says the International Monetary Fund, IMF, has been wrong in its projection of Nigerians' economy in the last 4 years. Now, according to him, in the last 4 years, IMF has got it wrong about a projection, Akabweze said while speaking with newsmen. Now, he spoke on the economic projection of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's government for 2024. Of course, you recall on November 29th, the president presented his maiden budget estimate of 27.5 trillion naira for the year 2024 to the National Assembly. Now, and of course, the projection was at variance and ambitious to the prediction of IMF earlier in October. Of course, the Washington-based lender had projected that the country's economy would grow at 3.1% in 2024. However, the budget office boss said IMF projection does not represent the holy grail on economic growth, adding that the organization can't get it right better than the people who have direct responsibility for managing their individual economies. Of course, this is another conversation that is already worrisome. We have to take our minds back to the problem Nigerians are facing now. The redesigned cash policy. We recall that IMF had spoken against it. The World Bank had spoken against it. Even the finance minister in the country had distanced himself from, the policy. But we saw the then president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, and the embattled CBN governor now, Godwin Emefiele, going ahead regardless of the warnings, regardless of the projections, regardless of the comments, and the advisories that were given by the IMF and other international monetary organizations. And we saw the adverse effect of that on Nigerians. And today we are crying foul. The government has still yet not able to compensate Nigerians for the amount of money that has been lost. The banking sector, somebody somewhere is sitting fat and eating fat from billions of Nigerians' money that were lodged, on transit during that cash crunch policy. And now we're seeing another comment coming from the federal government. It seems like the arrogance on the part of our leaders is getting more emboldened by the day. I mean, how do you explain the fact that you go, these are persons you go to borrow money, these are persons you go to for advisories, but when they give advisories and comments that does not tally with what you want or what you have said to Nigerians, you begin to, attack the institution as not, being able to clearly see the statistics. But these are people who have been in the business for the longest time, and in situations and scenarios that their advisories are not, in opposite of what you have said to Nigerians or what you intend to say to Nigerians, you embrace it, swallow it hook, line, and sinker. But when they give you a different standpoint, it literally looks like the federal government has some measure of shocker against being told the bitter truth.
Now, the thing that one of the pointers here from Ben Akabweze is the fact that Nigeria's actual growth has always grown past the IMF's projection in the past 4 years. So maybe if the IMF projects that is the International Monetary Fund, if they project that Nigeria's growth is going to be at a certain percentage, Ben Akabweze is saying that Nigeria seems to be growing beyond that in terms of the GDP, gross domestic product of the country. So he's saying that in the last 4 years, with regards to how much Nigeria grows, even if it's just a 0.01 percentage increase upon what the IMF said, he's saying Nigeria's economy grows beyond the projections of the IMF. Now, with this kind of information, if we take that consistent growth over the IMF's projection to bear and compare it with the analysis of the IMF, how does it inform policy decisions? How does it inform economic decisions by the federal government? Does it still give us room to be wasteful? does it still give us room to go ahead and borrow incessantly? Because we say, oh, although the IMF gives us advisories in this direction, we have noticed that over the past 4 years, our domestic product seems to still grow. Our internally generated funds still grows above this. But then we have to comparatively look at where it keeps us with regards to our debt burden. That's also a conversation that must be looked at. Now, when the president presented his 2024 appropriation bill to the National Assembly, there were certain projections he himself did. Of course, this is going to be in form of a collective idea, from the economic strength of his cabinet. So he's expecting that Nigerian economy will grow by 3.76%, while inflation that currently starts at 27.16 thereabout, but over 27% at this time, is expected to drop by 21 point is expected to moderate to 21.4% in 2024. That's several percentages. That's about coming down all the way to about 7% downwards. Now, what are the the modalities put in place to make sure that the inflation that we're currently experiencing, whether it's where the naira is concerned, whether it's where food prices or the cost of living is concerned, even the cost of manufacturing in the country, inflation has literally hit and cut across all levels of the economy. How does he intend to make sure that it falls from 27% to about 21.4%? What are the modalities in place? Don't also forget that the current budget deficit stands at 18 trillion naira, which is about 3.88% of the gross domestic product. But we need to tally what Ben Akabueze is saying with all of these numbers in place. If you're saying that we do grow way more than the IMF usually projects, how are you going to take that information and directly juxtapose it with every other thing that is happening in the economy of Nigeria? That information must have an interpretation that takes us out of where we are currently with regards to the naira and economically. I think that is the most important thing here to look at. It's not just about telling us that we are doing well. Now, he's of course said, these IMF's projections do not represent the holy grail on the economic growth, and of course said the organization can't get it right better than the people who have direct responsibility for managing the individual economies. Now, this is still his assertion with regards to how better the Nigerian economy does as against the IMF projection. Now, we're also seeing the fact that he said the growth rate projected by the Tinubu government in its maiden budget doesn't even yet reflect the ambition of the government, adding that the incumbent administration wants to double the GDP before the end of its first term. Well, now, these are promises and promises, Francis. These are promises and promises. These are economic projections and conversations in the theory. I always ask, what are the modalities? As the budget office boss, what exactly is he going to do in collaboration with everyone who's going to get an allocation to make sure that beyond the money sent to their agencies, they're going to be able to generate more revenue for the country?
Well, first and foremost, there's a very big difference between projections and statistical data, predictions.
Exactly.
When you project, you don't have the data. It has not happened. But when you have the data and you predict based on the data that you have, those are two different things.
And I also think that is what Ben Akabueze is actually saying, that they are the ones, responsible, hands on deck with the economic realities and the data. So they should know better and be able to project them.
Oh, yeah. When it comes to data in Nigeria, can we say we really have statistics to, back up claims in this country? I mean, start with the population of the people. Can we say for a fact how many number of people we have in Nigeria? So if there is any agency that has statistical data across board, that would be the IMF, that would be the foreign lenders. Of course, this is more or less like, the issue that would always spread out between the national and the subnational in Nigeria, where you would see the NBS issuing statistics about states and what is happening in the states, and the state coming out to say, no, what the NBS is saying is not true. But you go back to the states, they don't have their own statistics office. They don't have any method put in place to conduct research and have data to analyze and get to, projections that has been given. So when you don't have enough data to make projections, and someone who has data makes the projection, the simplest wisdom would be for you to look into that projection and match that with, you know, what you have on ground and see how it goes. And if it doesn't tally, then you get to, you know, put in place the necessary measures to ensure you also have adequate data to cover the length and breadth of the country before you make projections. And like I said, these are mere speculations. Don't forget, just yesterday, the federal government told us they are planning to have 1,000 fleets of electric cars in Nigeria. And one of the very biggest questions that popped up in my mind, I know a lot of Nigerians will be asking the same question. In a country where electricity is fluctuating like you know, thunders and lightning, in a country where getting quality power supply, public power supply, is a serious challenge, you're talking about 1,000 fleets of electric cars. You're talking about, you know, changing the narrative as far as transportation is concerned. What modalities have been put in place? And I love the fact, and that drawing my attention, what I'm drawing our attention to this morning is that the federal government said they are setting an ambitious target. Setting a target is completely different from having projections based on analyzed statistics and data that are available. So what Okabweze is doing this morning is just another projection, is just another ambitious statement coming from the federal government. Yes, they can make the projection, oh, Nigeria is going to grow by this, the economy is going to appreciate by this. But if we look at the realities of the data on ground, will that add up to what will become of Nigeria? I mean, of course, if we have to go down memory lane, that will go back to the IMF, that will go back to the World Trade Organization. Of course, still going back to the cash crunch. We also saw that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala had spoken against the decision of the federal government. But did we take those advisories, even when it came from one of us and somebody who managed the finances of this country during the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan? And we saw what transpired. But the government didn't listen. And where did that lead Nigerians to? At the end of the day, is the average man on the streets of Nigeria that suffers. So the federal government and its officials need to get off their high horse and stop making projections, ambitious projections. And if you're making ambitious projections and you're given the valid data and projection from relevant agencies that of course have the authority and authenticity of their data is proven over time, then you need to get off your high horse, get off your pride and arrogance and take a lesson. And then of course, adhere to those advisories and use that to even guide your action plans and policy directions for you to be able to even meet up with that ambitious projections.
But you know, also Francis, just a little bit on Ben Okabweze's side, you know that even with regards to what's the name now, to IMF, Nigeria as a country has not given them correct data to work with. If generally as a country we have not conducted census, we don't have data, we don't have information in place. Even the IMF with regards to Nigeria works on projected data. So it's also possible that the IMF does not have correct information because they don't have. Where is the IMF generating its own data from on behalf of Nigeria, a country that does not have comprehensive, data? So it's just also a matter of generally, whether it's the World Trade Organization or the IMF or Nigeria itself, we are working with an estimated data for Nigeria. We are all projecting what it's going to be like. But at the end of the day, whether the IMF is correct or whether Ben Okabweze is correct in his assertions, I think the bottom line here is we need to get beyond all of these very ambitious projections. It's some form of, it's pridefulness, right? For you to say, oh, we're going to, and it's political shenanigans also. We're saying, oh, we're going to improve the economy by 3.27%. We're going to do this. We're all here to watch in the next 4 years. How are you going to go about to achieve that? So far, so good. Since May 29, some of the policy reforms and, policies that have been, established in the country, where has it taken us to? Yes, some experts say that it's going to bite now, but give it the next 15 months, we might see difference. 15 months is just some corners away, Francis. And we need to begin to see how things level up. But let's move away from that particular story. Nigerians can only hope that the minders of our system know exactly what they are saying and know exactly what they are doing.
Well, Nigerians can know at this point, and Nigerians can have that hope unless we see actions happening. And we've seen different policies of this administration already being described by the administration as ill-timed, ill-conceived. So if within the first 7 months of the administration we've heard those comments, it's literally like the first few hours the government say, yes, this is the direction to go, this is going to change the narrative, and Nigerians are like, are you serious about this? And then you wake up the next few hours and the government is saying, oh, well, sorry, this, policy was ill-timed, ill-conceived, and does not suit, with the present realities. But we move away from that. We see that another of the glitches that have been found within the ranks and files of the federal government over the IPPIS system has been, a major concern. As of yesterday, we talked about the fact that over 2,000, Nigerian civil servants were unable to, receive their November salaries. Of course, we saw as at then the federal government had said that they were working to resolve the challenges. Well, the update is that the civil servant whose salaries were withheld by the federal government due to technical glitches in the integrated payroll and personnel information system have now begun to receive credit alert for November 2023 salaries. Of course, in an interaction with different civil servants, they confirmed the development, particularly in Abuja, as of yesterday. Of course, these are, serious conversations that we had, and we had said it was necessary for the government to rise up to the responsibility to look into this to ensure that, civil servants do not, miss their November salary, and not to talk of December salary. Of course, the national president of the Association of Senior Civil Servants, Tommy Etum, had alias that then warned that about 5,000 civil servants risk forfeiture of their November and December salaries over the IPPIS verification and other discrepancies. But it's a good thing for, I think this one deserves commendation, that within 24 hours, 48 hours of this happening, the federal government is able to, resolve the malfunctioning of the IPPIS, and then, of course, strengthen it and allow for civil servants to get the money that was due for them. It's a beautiful thing because the laborer deserves their wages at this point.
Well, it's good to see that, the issue where we experience the withholding by the federal government of salaries of workers due to the technical glitch on the integrated payroll personnel information system has been somewhat managed, and, workers are beginning to receive their credit alerts, as, reported. But we do hope that this IPPIS issue is literally an issue that needs to be put to rest. Now, 2,000 workers' November salaries, I hope that all 2,000 of them have been paid, and those of them that still had issues with the verification in terms of dates of appointment and also date of birth, we do hope that they're able to, just rectify what the issue is. We also saw that Tommy Etum, who is the national president of the Association of Civil Servants, had said that about 5,000 civil servants took the risk of forfeiting their November and December salaries over these IPPIS verification and other discrepancies. Now, we had already established that that was not good news for anyone in the country at this time. For whatever anyone earns, it's not a good projection to say that, oh, because of verification issues, because of glitches, 5,000 is quite a lump sum. Multiply, 5,000 people losing their salaries, and every dependent, both the person who sells okra and pepper for them in the market, who is not going to get, who is not going to get sales because 5,000 persons have been, economically sabotaged by any, kinds of systems, So let's hope that so far so good. This particular discrepancy is going to be fixed by the civil service of the federation and also every sub-union that is involved. So far so good. 2,772 persons have been verified and forwarded to the IPPIS for payment, of course, because there were no issues. But let's see what happens to the other 5,000 workers. Let's hope that this is not a case where we begin to see that workers are beginning to carry placards at this time of the year. But that's where we put our flash news to rest and we get on straight to our major stories.
Rise and shine. Rise and shine.
Of course, it's still Rise and Shine. We're starting off on the major stories. Of course, we see that since the commencement of this administration, when President Ahmed Bola Tinubu forward the names of his ministers, including the former governor state, Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike, of course, subsequently after their confirmation and assignment of portfolio, we saw some of the appointees of government really talking tough as to how they intend to transform the ministries, agencies and departments that has been entrusted to them. One of such was the Minister of the FCT, former Governor of River State, Nyesom Wike, who came with a thundering loud ovation into the ministry, the FCTA, and of course, came with some of the strongest comments to Nigerians, particularly the elite class in the society. One of such being that people who built houses in places they were not supposed to build, the houses were going to go down regardless of who they were in the affairs of this country. Of course, we saw different moves made by the Minister of the FCTs shortly after that, and different incidences, including the one chance controversy that caused a lot of tensions in the nation. We see that protesters have stormed the federal capital territory, civil society groups and Nigerians stormed the street and the National Assembly to protest the removal of the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike. The protesters who stormed the National Assembly complex said Wike's administration was incompetent and lacked vision for the FCT. Of course, we saw the spokesperson for the protesters, Adamu Kabia, the convener of a civil society network of civil societies for economic sustainability, said Wike should also be probed over his policies on land allocation in the FCT. Now, this got me into thinking: are we talking about civil society who has the interest of the people at heart, or civil society that is being manipulated? Because the conversations in Nigeria has gotten past just having civil society who are validly, advocating for the rights of the Nigerian people, for the rights of individuals who cannot possibly speak up for themselves, to civil society organizations who are being manipulated. Now, let's look at some of the moves that have been made by Minister Nyesom Wike. Definitely, before now, we knew for a fact that the FCT was in need of serious work, serious restructuring, serious infrastructural facelift. I think this morning or today we're going to have some flag of internal road construction around the Osekoro area, and of course just to refurbish the area and make sure it works and represents the true picture of the FCT of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But of course, land deeds, we saw people who got houses or lands where they were not supposed to, designated areas, and then because of their influence, because of their power, because of the contacts and the connects that they have, people were able to get those lands, and Wike came in and said, no, enough of this. Remember, just recently we were also told of the illegal means and measures through which people, were able to access and gain control and ownership of land in the FCT through illegal, agents who had nothing to do with the lands that they sold and gave to people. So all of this restructuring, all of this rebranding that Wike has done within the FCTA and different moves that has been taken. I think just 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, I had conversations with some of my military friends in the FCT, and they said, well, if we have to be honest, some of the steps that has to do with, reclaiming some of the lands and properties in the FCT is actually one taken in the right direction, because you find lands, you find areas fenced around, you find houses people are not living, you find places lying fallow, and of course, it would always be said this belongs to a high-profile personality in Nigeria, and there is no better person as far as Nigerians are concerned, or most Nigerians are concerned, that other than the personality of Wike. Knowing what he did in Rivers State and knowing his kind of personality, I mean, he's one person who does not fear anybody, and when he wants to act, as far as that is in the interest of the people, will definitely go ahead.
Well, and there's a lot to look into this. We also see that one of the members of the Ohane Zendibo have come to say that the protest against Nyesom Wike was instigated by the opposition to be crafted as a distraction for both President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration and Nyesom Wike himself from carrying out his duties and responsibilities in the FCT. So he said this is a calculated attempt at distracting the duo from carrying out their duties. Of course, they are saying that all of these activities are not necessarily in the best interest of the people of the FCT, in terms of saying let's hit the streets and let us protest the activities of the FCT minister. Of course, now he also called for Nigerians to ignore the antics of opposition parties to distract his administration. Now they're saying, of course, it goes back to saying that President Tinubu is experienced for his job role as president. Nyesom Wike also is, is also responsible enough for his job role as the minister of the FCT. That whole conversation where he said, that Mr. Tinubu picks the right man for the right job. Now, of course, we are seeing how this infrastructure and economic development strides by the FCT minister, whether it's to shake up the whole FCT and stabilize it again. But of course, we know that there's going to be several people who will not buy into the idea of how this is, going about. Let's not also forget, first of all, when you say that Nyesom Wike is getting on lands, that bringing down projects and edifices, are there any kinds of compensation that are being made to these persons? Although you can rightfully establish the fact that okay, maybe they did put that facility on a wrong way, is there going to be any kinds of compensations for them? Most of these projects, at the end of the day, if we calculate how much quote and unquote damage that Nyesom Wike is going to first of all establish in the FCT before he takes it to the renewed hope, that everybody is hoping that is his target. If we calculate how much everything is going to be worth, it's going to be running into hundreds of millions of naira, if not into billions of naira. Calculate how much all of these facilities are worth cut across the nation. Is there going to be a better way? Maybe not in terms of execution, but usually the narrative surrounding these kinds of activities is also very important. If you come in such a way that it looks like, hey, we are soliciting to grab back the blueprints and the FCTA design, and we have come to notice that this facility is getting in the way, we give you so amount of days to evacuate, or this and that. There has to be some negotiation. But I think the crux of the problem here, whether this is politically motivated or not, is that Nyesom Wike is actually approaching this issue of the FCT with a sledgehammer approach, and it doesn't work for anybody at any time. When people begin to perceive your leadership as some form of tyranny, although you think that what you're doing is in the best interest of the people, you're still going to have these kinds of reaction. So whether or not, to a very large extent, yes, this can be politically motivated, or then again, it might not be politically motivated. Even the people who are the original citizens of that whole area in the FCT might be bearing some grievances against the move of Nyesom Wike at this time in the FCT.
Well, yes, as far as Nigeria is concerned, when you look at the realities on ground, when you look at the way the elites behave as if they're gods who cannot be held accountable, who should not account to anybody in the country, then you definitely understand that the only hand that we need at this point in time, as far as the FCT and indeed Nigeria is concerned, is a strong iron fist that is capable of breaking down anybody, regardless of who you are, what position you have occupied or you're currently occupying in this country. I mean, let's go to the very basics of common sense. You're a government official. This area is designated for schools, and then you acquire land and you build a residential apartment. That is literally against the law of the land, but you know it. But because you feel you're an elite, you have the buttons to press, you have the connection, you can literally just pick up your phone and call somebody in the corridors of power, and then they'll ask the government agencies to look the other way. You go ahead and do it. So we need the likes of Wike to sanitize the system. I'm not saying, Nigerians are not saying, most Nigerians who are supporting Wike are not saying Wike is a saint, but we need a strong hand to deal decisively with some of our politicians and in fact, the elite members of the society who feel like they are untouchable. They cannot be tamed. They cannot be made to do things the right way. if we don't get to that point here in this country, then definitely it's going to be business as usual, because everybody feels like once you've acquired some level of wealth, once you've acquired some level of power, once you have some great personalities within the corridors of power on your contact list and you dine and wine with them, you can literally break any law. You can literally do just anything in the country and go scot-free with it. So the personality of Wike is liked by many and loved by many because of his stand, because of who he is and how he goes. You know, literally the FCT doesn't need somebody who is lily-livered. It doesn't need somebody who does not have the boldness and the braveness to, you know, approach and confront anything and any person that is in front of him that stands in the way of advancing the growth and development of the FCT and by extension Nigeria. And that's the personality of Wike at this point in time. So the question surrounding the protest, there are definitely two ways. Like has been alleged, it's possible somebody is instigating civil society organizations to, you know, champion the protest. But to what end? Who is going to benefit? Who is going to be at the tail end of benefiting from the protest? Is it the people of Nigeria? Is it the common people on the street? Or a few elite members who are sponsoring the protest or allegedly sponsoring the protest? So these are concerns that we need to look into. It would be one thing if you say, oh, the FCT minister has done wrong. Yes, if he does wrong, like the 10 billion you know, naira voted for the VP residence renewal. Yeah, we can say how much. What are we doing? What are you thinking? This is not the right time. But when the minister is doing something that is right and a few elites do not feel comfortable because it is coming to affect them, then definitely that's not something we have to kill ourselves over. But it's a good thing that is happening at this point in time. The elite, I mean, across the states of the Federation, you'll find literally areas, I think it was just recently in Akwa Ibom said that the governor had to move about the industrial park where people get to, you know that this area is designated as an industrial hub. You go and buy a land, get a land. And then of course, instead of building a business facility, you're building a residential apartment. When you know for a fact, this is supposed to be a business hub meant for industries, companies to be located or sited in. But you got that parcel of land in the disguise that you're going to build a business complex. And then instead of that, you erected, you know, a residential area, or you've not even erected any building at all. And the government says, we are going to revoke all the license and look into the people who are applying for this license. That in any way does not go against the laws of the land. So it's basically a way of sanitizing the system and making people understand that when places are designed and designated for particular purposes, for specific needs, for specific reasons, you need to adhere to it, regardless of whoever you are, what position you've occupied or are occupying in government. Yes, being in the corridors of power might give you the leverage to acquire those things quicker than any other Nigerian would be able to. But while you are doing that, ensure that you are using that place for the purpose for which it was meant for. So we can come in to sanitize the system. If you ask the rain, look around, it's literally going to work in the favor of Nigerians. So however the people felt, the question of whether President Ahmed Bola Tinubu is going to fire Wike or sack Wike is a big question that, you know, most persons will say is laughable at this point in time. I mean, when you look at what Wike has done so far.
Well, that's something that's going to be left in the purview of the president. Does Nyesom Wike look like someone that President Tinubu will willingly let go of? These elites in the society that think that they have an extra leg, do they have what it really takes, you know, to make that happen? But let's see how, you know, this can, you know, be geared towards the collective good of the people of the FCT and Nigeria at large. But let's move on to our very next story this morning. Conversations around budget, defense, ministries, agencies, and departments. Of course, we saw that the chairman of the Senate Appropriation Committee, Senator Adiola Olamilekun, directed the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, Mele Kyari, to appear before the committee in 24 hours. Now, of course, Olamilekun asked Kyari to appear in company of the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, warning that failure to appear undermines the legislature and sabotages the process. Now, of course, they are also looking at the need for them to present the list of all individuals, company operating with OML licenses in Nigeria, as well as total production output approved on a daily basis. Now, the lawmaker expressed concerns that some of the revenues required to drive the 2024 budget was attributed to the NNPCL, which according to him was owned by the federal government and responsible to it, and by extension the three arms of government. So I think first of all we established the fact that with how much the budgetary allocation is dependent on the activities of the NNPCL, the likes of Medicare should be the first to actually respond to come and defend their budget.
Well, this goes back to the conversation we just finished having. Lawlessness, public officials acting with impunity and complete disrespect for constituted authorities. These appointees of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, these people who have been entrusted with the leadership of this country, how does a National Assembly that is saddled with making the laws of the country summon people who have been entrusted with the mandate to change the narrative of the country to come explain or to come answer questions bordering on accountability and transparency? And these people failed to show up. What are the excuses? Is there even enough excuse to substantiate or validate the absence of anybody that's being invited for questioning when it comes to running the affairs of the country? But yet, days upon days, weeks upon weeks, there is literally no week that we wouldn't wake up to hear from the National Assembly XYZ political appointees or appointees of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu was invited and has failed to show up. We saw the military chiefs in this country, being invited for a debate, and they all disappeared. But instead sent representatives, as if the representatives are the ones that were given the appointment, are the ones that are saddled with the direct responsibility to oversee the affairs of the security of this nation. It took the threat from the National Assembly bordering on their budget before the military, chief finally attended that debate. How many times have we heard from the National Assembly subcommittees of people in position of power and authority in this country failing to show up? I mean, a warrant of arrest has been issued for the CBN governor and 17 others, still bordering on the fact that they have failed to show up to answer questions. And one would ask, what is the difficult thing in answering questions when you know that you're qualified, when you know that your hands are clean, when you know that you have a well grasp of things within your ministries, agencies, and departments? So it goes to show that people feel once you are in position of power, once you've been given some mantle of leadership, you are supreme, you are above the law. Because the National Assembly, the legislature, represents the law of this country. So if people who have been appointed into the executive, who are meant to be the leaders who should lead by example as far as the implementation of the law, as far as respect to constituted authority is concerned, would fail to respect those authorities, what then happens to the average Nigerian? What example are they showing to Nigerians? You're being called to answer questions on how you intend to change the narrative in your ministries. You failed to show up. You're being given the first summon, you're being given the second summon, even the third summon, and then you failed to show up. I would love to, at this point in time, Nigerians who ask President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, the National Assembly, Senate President Godswill Akpabio, the Speaker of the House of Representative Tajudeen Abbas, I think it's about time for us to have a piece of legislation that maybe spells jail term immediately for anybody who fails to appear for invitations. Because this is becoming too alarming. And it's not working in the interest of Nigeria. How do you get to, stay away when you're supposed to answer questions and then nothing happens and all that is issued is a warrant of arrest? So after the arrest, what next? It definitely means that this group of politicians, this group of appointees can wake up tomorrow when serious issues concerning the welfare of Nigerians come up and they're supposed to, answer to those responsibilities within 24 hours. That will not happen. Okay, let's imagine that the life of a Nigerian is at stake, and it would need the National Assembly's intervention in collaboration with these, minds of the system, and you're being invited, and then you don't show up. That means that Nigerian person is going to definitely die. And after that, what is the federal government going to do? Issue apologies, condolence messages, visit to give money? Would that bring back the life of that Nigerian? So we need to put stiffer penalties in place to ensure that political office holders, appointees of government, understand the critical importance of being accountable to the Nigerian people. And so when you're being called to answer questions by the National Assembly, you have to appear, because that is your responsibility. And if your hands are clean as a leader, there's literally no reason for you to want to run away from being questioned.
Well, we know that Medicare has, defaulted twice now on in regards to the committee inviting him to, answer certain questions. These questions he's about to answer is for the budget. There is another one, that's an allegation of some sort, but yet we've continued not to see him appear. I think the most concerning thing will be the fact that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu just recently reappointed Medicare as the GCEO of NNPCL. When you have the same man that has journeyed us over the years in the quagmire where we find ourselves with regards to oil and gas, upstream and downstream sectors, they still sent him again not to appear before committees and answer questions. And the weight of the burden of, the budgetary allocation does rest on its activities. Then it goes without saying. It's easy for you to just make your deductions from there. But let's see. Now that the House Committee leader on allocation has raised, his voice again, is, Medicare going to appear and answer these questions, and so that they can have conversations about taking the best possible decision, for next year's budget. But then move ahead from that particular story. We'll quickly take this one as our last story this morning. The Nigerian government is allocating over 138 million naira to combat fake news and other initiatives in the 2024 budget. Now we see that the federal government, the Federal Ministry of Information, and National Orientation of the Nigerian federal government has set aside 138,066,187 naira in its 2024 budget for a number of projects, one of which is the fight against fake news. Now, this money is expected to be part of 2024 appropriation bill that the National Assembly is currently talking about. Now, its pledges to use various tasks, including fighting fake news, printing calendars, helping ministers make media appearances, and working with social media influencers, amongst others. So out of this 138 million naira, of course, they hope to be able to get a good standing in terms of media. So whether it is these ministers going out to make appearances on mainstream media, prints and all of the social media, using influencers, that is what the Ministry of Information and Orientation intends to do. Of course, we see that they said 40 million of that 130 will be spent on making calendars, 30 million on publicity and working with foreign media, 20.7 million on interactions between ministers and influencers and experts and the media in print and social media. We also see an extra 21.7 million naira set aside to help social media sites grow and connect with each other. We also see that this budget plans comes after the president presented. So Francis, let's look at this breakdown of what they intend to use this 130 million naira for, 138 million naira for, as an initiative of communications. Once again, we are seeing pipelines for waste. I don't know what's, I don't know how we are thinking about these issues, but it feels like beyond, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu looking like he has a blueprint for the country, a renewed hope agenda holistically at the national level. It looks like ministries and sub-agencies do not know what to use allocations for. Because if you look at the fact that 40 million of 138 million is going to be used to print calendars, to put where? Are we hanging these calendars on the streets of Nigeria for Nigerians to know the itinerary of ministers, or what exactly? Why are we spending 40 million naira, Francis?
Well, first and foremost, you asked a question. Would there be a need to combat fake news when government is sincere and transparent to the Nigerian people? Would there be a need for government to vote too much money when the coverage of the activities of government is being made available to every media organization in this country, across boards, across the regions of the country? The answer would be no. But of course, we go back to the era of Lai Mohammed, who of course was one of the most controversial Minister of Information and Culture in this country. We cannot forget in a hurry the different things that used to be spewed from the federal government, literally speaking from multiple sides of the mouth when issues arises. Definitely would look like the federal government is planning to counter information on the part of the media, and of course try to put on its own propaganda. And so that is why you have that huge amount of money being budgeted for it. But of course, we'll also need to look into the other side of the story. Yes, we know some persons can, cook up stories and put it up on the social media. But of course, we also know that as far as the internet is concerned, news organizations, news agencies, media outfits, seasoned professionals, broadcast journalists or journalists do not just put up information without verifying. And so with this verification comes that the authenticity and validity of these news items. So what is the essence of cooking up so much money for the defense? It's a controversy, it's a puzzle, it's a situation that leaves Nigerians wondering where exactly the federal government is going. But be that as it may, the money has been voted, and we'll watch out to see how these spending and how much of these calendars will be printed and what exactly would happen. But of course, this is where we're going to pause our conversation this morning. We'll be heading out to the news brief. Thanks. Mary Joseph is standing by to take us on. When we come back, a lot more waiting for you on Rise and Shine. Please stay with us.
Christmas season is here again. Are you aware that making your business or products visible on a television space gives your brand a wider visibility and patronage? In the spirit of the season, Spectrum Television is offering a whopping 25% discount on all services. Advertise your products and services while this offer lasts from 1st December 2023 to January 31st, 2024. We are a television with a passion to take your business and services on a satisfactory lane. You do not want to miss this opportunity. For more inquiries, visit our city office at number 2 Taft Plaza Close off Akaitinen Road, Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, or call the following numbers on your screen. Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon. For premium broadcasts and entertainment, sports on the go, and news around the world, watch Spectrum TV on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and free-to-air frequency 12733. Visit our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Every day marks a day of significance.
That in view of the apology tendered by this former minister who had earlier been cleared by this August Assembly,
as we face critical issues, developments and events which shape our social and political landscape here in Nigeria and beyond. Political Spectrum is a program specially designed to help make sense of all the moving parts of developments and occurrences in our nation's polity and political economy.
There is nothing wrong with Nigeria, but there's everything wrong.
The educational history of public figures holds significance beyond mere biographical details.
from executive, legislative and judicial developments at national and subnational levels to international diplomacy and relations.
Join us for exclusive interviews with key political figures, expert opinions, analysts, thought-provoking conversations for and against, shedding light on the major issues that matter. We will always keep you updated on the most factual, smartest and unbiased reportage.
Stay tuned to Political Spectrum. Political Spectrum. All sides matter at the round table. Political Spectrum. Exclusive to Spectrum Television.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigeria Police Force, which shall be administered, organized and supervised by the Nigerian police.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the matters council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court, my lord.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships determines how well people, relationships, organizations thrive and how long they stick together. Join Uyai Anyekan on Connect every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on channel 421 on Star Times to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories and how to navigate relationships and family life in the 21st century. Real people, real faces, real stories. Connect live on Spectrum Television.
Government, Secretary General, delegates.
This was the Lagos Nigerian for SpectrumTv to recover for the lapses in County.
A very good morning to you and welcome to your morning news brief in Spectrum, live from Uyo. My name is Mary Joseph. We begin the news brief this morning with the reports that civil servants whose salaries were withheld by the federal government due to technical glitches in the integrated payroll and personal information systems have now begun to receive credit alerts from November 2023 salaries. Several senior civil servants who confirmed the development to newsmen in Abuja on Wednesday said that thousands of civil servants had their November 2023 salaries withheld by the government due to IPPIS irregularities. Away from that, the Minister of State for Defense, Bello Matawalle, has urged the military to remain focused in its battle against terrorists. He said Sunday's accidental bombing of civilians in Kaduna State should not dampen their fighting spirit. The minister, who regretted that the incident, noted that despite what had happened, the fight against insurgency and terrorism must continue. Matawalle said this when he visited the survivors of the incident at Badaru Diko Teaching Hospital in Kaduna State. Back here, the Akwa Ibom State House of Assembly has passed a resolution authorizing Governor Moino to constitute interim administrations in the 31 local government areas of the state. Resolution authorizing Governor Moino to constitute interim administrations in the 31 local government areas of the state. The House resolution, which is in pursuant of Section 5, Subsection 2 of the Local Government Administration Law 2017, was passed at plenary following a message from the governor addressed to the Speaker and read by the clerk Nsika Kabasi Orok. The governor in the message had informed the lawmakers that there was no provisions in the 2023 budget for local government elections, and so there was no funds appropriated for that purpose. Governor Ena further hinted that the State Independent Electoral Commission had commenced the process leading to the announcement of the date for election of new chairman of the local government councils. Hence, he is left with no alternative but to set up interim governance in the local government pending the conduct of elections as proposed by the ACSEC, and prayed the House to favorably consider his request. On the foreign scene, Senate Republicans have blocked a move to pass an aid bill for Ukraine after failing to secure border compromises they sought in exchange. The $110 billion package includes $61 billion for Ukraine, as well as funds for Israel and aid for Gaza. Reports say Republicans are insisting that any aid to Ukraine be tied to sweeping U.S. immigrations and asylum reforms. The White House has warned that U.S. funds for Ukraine could soon run out. And in sports, young Super Falcons quartet Esther Oyinezide, Abiodun Deborah Gift Monday, and Nubia Christiana took to social media to celebrate the team's qualification for the next year's Women's African Cup of Nations in Morocco. Recall that the Falcons beat Cape Verde 2-1 in Pereira on Tuesday and qualified for the 2024 WAFCON on 7-1 aggregates. The win means Nigeria have qualified for every edition of WAFCON, with Morocco 2024 the 15th time the tournament will be held. We'll have details of this and many more in our news at 12. My name is Mary Joseph. Let's get back to Rise and Shine, where we have Francis and Oyai on standby to have a wonderful morning.
Government, Secretary General, delegates.
Voting for SpectrumTv to recover for the lapses in Plateau County.
I'd like to welcome you back as to Rise and Shine. Mary Joseph just finished taking us around the news. Of course, a lot still happening in Nigeria, and we head on right into the spotlight. But of course, you can catch up on all our conversations across social media platforms, all of which you can find on spectrumtvlive.ng. Next up is Daily Spotlight.
On Daily Spotlight this morning, our very first stop will be the Punch newspaper. And we're looking at the stories on the front page. The big story there says protesters storm National Assembly and threaten suit. We also see here death reach 127. Protesters condemn killings. United Nation urges military to protect civilians. PDP asks Tinubu to declare national mourning. Victims may demand 29 billion naira in damages. Of course, the story is emanating from the Kaduna village bombing. We also see here 346 billion naira voted for presidential jet refreshment. Others 346 billion naira. Page 21 is where you can find the details. Airlines eye $964 billion. Nigerian African carriers post losses. Page 22. Federal government loses $161 million to 9-year conflict with Intel, says NPA. Supreme Court, 11 justices scale NJC hurdles, await Tinubu's nod. We also have here on the front page of the Punch, federal government votes 50 billion naira for student loan. Page 28, family mourns Nigerian lady strangled to death in UK. Page 5 is where you can find details. Last story here, suspected ritualist dismember OAU students, sell parts to Ogun Yahoo boy. Page 5, and that's all we have on the front page of the Punch.
Well, our next stop this morning would be the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. On the front page of Nigerian Tribune, the kicker says Kaduna drone strike. Protesters storm National Assembly. PDP wants independent probe. Of course, we see the writer there says review rules of engagement. United Nations tells military. Many still missing as death toll rises to 127. The story is on page 16 on the front page of Nigerian Tribune this morning. Of course, still on the front page of Nigerian Tribune, NJC recommends Samani Abiru Sankey 8 orders of Supreme Court justices. The story is on page 2. So on the front page of Nigerian Tribune, stop tax waivers, offer rebates. Senate committee asks federal government. Finance minister admits 3 trillion loss in 2023 at a point when we are looking for money. 3 trillion loss as a result of tax waivers. The story is on page 2. Of course, still on the front page of Nigerian Tribune, P&G to dissolve ground operations in Nigeria, revert to import-only business model. Story is on page 6. We see Court of Appeal relocates Kogi governorship election petitions tribunal to Abuja. Alleged attack on tribunal secretary. Police warn against inflammatory statements. The story is on page 23. Police arrest suspected ritualists over that of 100-level OAU student. Stories on page 15. No money voted to renovate my residence. That's according to Ngbajabiamela. The stories on page 8. Federal government to leverage Islamic finance to fund green projects. Nigerian Islam's finance industry has 2.9 billion US dollars size. That's according to the secretary. The stories on page 7. Those are the major stories on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune.
All right, moving on from the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, our very next stop this morning is Daily Trust. And the big story there on Daily Trust, zero allocation for Mambila Power Project in 2024. Ministry gets 400 million naira for conferences. Senators vow to query minister. It's poor to emasculate our region, says Northern Elders Forum. Says federal government not ready to address energy crisis. Kaduna village massacre, protesters besiege National Assembly, Zaria. NJC recommends appointments of 11 Supreme Court justices, 32 orders. Border closure, we are losing 13 billion naira weekly, says freight forwarders. Gunmen attack Kogi Election Tribunal scribe, cart away documents. You also see here prisoners from foreign lands working at construction sites in Nigeria. Senate panel. PDP, NNPP, 5 others form coalition. Issues in Kano, Plateau pointed to a one-party state. Gaza war may aggravate threats to international peace, says United Nations Secretary General. Of course, and that's all we have on the front page of Daily Trust.
Well, that will take us to the very last paper we have this morning. That will be the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. Of course, on Vanguard, the kicker there says bombing error won't deter fight against terrorism. Defense Minister. You see the riders there says UN deplores incidents. Their toll rises to 127 victims recount ordeals. Some injured moved to Army 44 Reference Hospital. PDP demands probe compensation for victims. Civil society organization seeks overhaul of security architecture. Stories on page 5. Still on Vanguard, NJC okays 11 new justices for Supreme Court. Stories on page 8. Demolition, court freezes Kano government accounts over 30 billion naira compensation. The polish is on story 13. Of course, stop tax waivers. Concessions already granted to corporate entities. Senate tells federal government. The story is on page 8. Government should discourage pegging naira to a currency. Experts. The story is on page 19. Pastor Chris Oyakilome sharing God's love through ministry. The story is on page 1. Of course, plot to subvert people's will portends danger. That's according to Coalition. Those are the major stories you find on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. Lots of issues and lots of major focus this morning. Basically, it seems the Kaduna State issue is still generating the most conversation, and the issue of tax waiver. I mean, over 3 trillion naira being lost in Nigeria as a result of tax waivers being granted to firms and corporations in Nigeria at a time when we are looking for money. And yet, if we have to put together all the money that Nigeria loses as a result of tax waivers and incentives and other things given by the federal government from the era of President Muhammadu Buhari rather till the present administration, is simply alarming. It seems like the federal government does not know what it's doing. I mean, how do you grant waivers to companies when you definitely need money? And even if you must grant those waivers, shouldn't it be at a point that will not really make so much of a loss to Nigeria?
Well, there's a lot to be worried about in Nigeria with how we're going about our spending, our allocations, our budget. Some of the things, I think it's the front page of the Punch that we looked at this morning that says that 342, over 300 billion naira has been budgeted for, the jet services, the food, and, other entertainment needs of the presidency. 346 billion naira voted for presidential jets, refreshment, and others. 346 billion out of 27 trillion naira that has been voted. Guess how much was voted for student loan? 50 billion naira. It's just that we have a wasteful set of people that are manning our systems. We don't even know where they sit down to do the mathematics before they come and tender these things to the National Assembly. Will the National Assembly probe and ask questions and cut from here and add to there? We talked about increment for health budget, for education budget. We are still where we are. But 346 billion is going to go for wining and dining and jet maintenance. Don't even forget that one of the presidential jets have been put up for sale. All of these kinds of things. It just puts us in a quagmire. Where Nigeria is going to leave all these kinds of issues is a big question now that Nigerians really need to be bothered about. But that's where we're going to put a pause to our conversation on the front pages of the national dailies. We'll take a quick break now. When we return, we'll be joined by our guest. We have some conversations that are really important for you to be a part of this morning, so stay with us.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
I'd like to say good morning once again and thanks for still being there. It's still Rise and Shine, the Thursday edition, coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. On Rise and Shine, we take our time to have conversations around socially oriented issues happening nationally and globally and how it directly affects the Nigerian people. This morning, we've been joined by our guest, Barrister Clifford Thomas, who is the coordinator of Kwabem Human Rights Community and Secretary NBA Uyo Human Rights Committee. We're going to be having this conversation ahead of the International Human Rights Day, which will be coming up on the 10th of December. Why are we taking out the time to put the ropes in the ground? Human rights issues around the world have become very prevalent, whether it's out of the issues emanating from the war between Russia and Ukraine, or the human rights issues emanating out of the Israel-Gaza war. Bring it back to Nigeria. Internally displaced persons, how are they being fed for? All around our environment, what are the kinds of human rights breaches that we are experiencing, but yes, we do not even know about? That's why we're having this conversation this Thursday morning. Thanks for being a part of Rise and Shine once again. Good morning, Barrister Clifford. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning, Oyema. Good morning, Spectrum. Good morning, viewers out there. You're welcome to the sphere of human rights.
The sphere of human rights. I think just because we are prepping ahead to commemorate the December 10th celebration, let's do basic definition. What is human rights really about? What would you say every person should understand basically about human rights?
Well, you must understand what human right is first. Some people claim to be human rights activists, or they talk of human rights without necessarily knowing what human right is. Human right is that basic condition which every human being is saddled with. You must live within the ambit of that, of those conditions. Without those conditions, you are either a beast or subhuman. And these rights stretch from being basic, like right to food, right to shelter, right to education, right to basic transportation, right to a living standard wage, right to the basic, the environment which is devoid of pollutants and things that could compromise your health. And stretches to civic rights, political rights, fundamental rights, social rights, environmental rights, economic rights, and all these have basic conditions within which a human can live. So in 1948, by December 10th, the United Nations came up with a list of those rights and called it the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. By the early 80s, the African, as it was then, Organization of African Unity, also went ahead to adopt the one it thought, all things it thought it could actually practice in Africa and give them to African countries through conventions. And that codified document was called the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So it was expected to be domesticated by various African nations. Some domesticated it, including Nigeria, in 1981, and others did not, for fear that they won't be able to give these basic rights to their citizens. And Nigeria, by 1979 and in 1999, was able to codify it, and those rights were captured as the fundamental human rights, which are found in Chapter 4 of the Constitution. But there were other rights that were actually excluded. The right to food is not seen as a right in Nigeria today. The right to shelter, the right to education, the right to water is a fundamental right. But those rights are not seen as rights in Nigeria. So because government felt it couldn't provide this, government decided to call it the directive principle of state policy as captured in Chapter 2 of the Constitution. Because if those rights become justiciable, government will go bankrupt. Government on a daily basis is busy abusing and violating the rights of Nigerians. So if the government had allowed socio-economic and cultural rights to become justiciable rights in Nigeria, I think government would have gone bankrupt. Even Chapter 4 of the Constitution, you notice that even when you get judgment for fundamental rights, to effect that judgment, the procedure requires you must actually get the consent of the Attorney General. And it is no right at all. We have not gotten rights in this country Because if you have rights, those rights must be justiciable. Those rights should be enforced. But in Nigeria, they just pay lip service to it. That's the challenge we have right now.
Now, when we see the fact that, for instance, the Nigerian government has continued to boycott the exactitude of what human rights should be, the provision of basic amenities, as it were, even which is also an offshoot of what democracy and governance should be providing, how can we hold the federal government and the state governments accountable to the provision of these things, although they have found a way in the law to boycott it?
Well, the basic thing is let Nigerians know what human rights are, one. Let Nigerians know the classification of human rights. Let Nigerians also clamor for structures that will help enforce human rights. The enforcement of human rights today is easier with individuals than with government institutions. And these individuals, very powerful individuals, they hide under the leverage given by the structure to actually subjugate and subvert, as it were, the rights of Nigerians. So Nigerians must know. Nigerians should be able to ask questions. Ask questions. How much allocation came into this state last month? What has the government done with the allocation? That is part of your rights. That's social rights and economic rights. And then by asking those questions, you are helping the government to become more responsible. You are helping the government to actually look at things the way they should be. And you are suggesting to the government from a bottom-top approach through a needs assessment what the government should do. Now, the government may not know it all. The government may not even know it's abusing people's rights. For instance, the dump site at Uyo Village Road is an abuse of environmental rights, of social rights, of cultural rights. It's an abuse of even civic rights, because the space, the environmental space, has been so choked that they pollute directly underground water, which are contaminated. In fact, they affect about 27 local government areas. You notice the incidence of increased typhoid and some waterborne diseases are caused by that dump site. And there are times the stench in the air becomes so pervasive that even those working in government offices around Barracks Road and government houses and those living around there, their rights are actually affected. And these persons, their lifespan is reducing on a daily basis. So they need to know. And they need to come out and tell the government, we know our rights, and this dump site here is not good. Dump sites are usually situated outside where people live. So in the overall, the most important thing with regards to human rights conversation is the knowledge of what our rights are. Now, you brought up a really, strong point in terms of asking questions with regards to allocation. Do we really have that premise where, citizens, Nigerians, Akwa Ibomites can actually ask, okay, what came into the state? Where can they go to ask this question, and where can they demand these answers from? One thing is asking the question, in the media and all of that. Where can we really get these answers from? Are the proper questions asked? When you want to ask questions you hope to get responsible answers for, you ask those questions without insulting the other person. You ask those questions politely, respectfully. You bring out your facts. When you ask questions, you should be able to also make suggestions as to the alternatives to what exists. So you ask these questions first from the media, through the media. You can send memos to the governor himself. When you send a memo to the governor or any government office, please ensure that you have 2 copies. The original one goes to the office, the authority. They stamp a control one stating who received, which office received, and what date and possibly time it was received. So that when you have to do follow-up, you say, I brought this letter to this office 2 months ago and no action has been taken. You have the Freedom of Information Act. You can use the Freedom of Information Act to access government offices. Most often when they know they are culpable, they won't reply. But you have opportunities to even sue them when the time comes. You can embarrass them by publicizing them. And you can go beyond just asking within Akwa Ibom or within Nigeria. The United Nations has procedure for you to complain. We are saddled with those procedures. So you can complain and say, your basic right according to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which of course is part of our fundamental rights. So where chapter 4 of the Constitution cannot give you or capture your basic rights, you use the African Charter on Human and People's Rights because it makes those rights justiciable and enforceable. So you can ask these questions. You can also ask through NGOs. You can ask NGOs, do your complaint to NGOs, and NGOs will take it up from there and make it an issue for advocacy.
Really strong education that we have just gotten there from, Barrister Clifford this morning. Of course, we're speaking to the coordinator, Akwa Ibom Human Rights Community, and Secretary, NBA Uyo Human Rights Committee. A lot of education with regards to what human rights really means and how, as individuals, as organizations in Nigeria and Akwa Ibom State, we can begin to take advantage of, human rights conversations. Of course, you can take advantage of our social media platforms and send us, your questions and your concerns with regards to human rights, what is really happening in your particular environment that you need an answer for. Now, this year's theme, the 2023 theme for the December 10 commemoration of the Human Rights Day, is consolidating and sustaining human rights culture into the future. Now, it looks like as the years begin to transcend, a lot of conversations around upholding the things that are most important to humanity is beginning to die down. Countries are not paying attention. In the background, I cited all of the issues and the wars happening around the world, and you would see the ICC and different nations of the world writing letters and saying, we think that there are errors committed against humanity in this country, in that country. But it looks like most presidents or leaders of nations are just literally calling it a bluff. How can we hold leadership nationwide, stateswide accountable to these laws that are actually available to protect humanity?
Well, let me do an entry point into that. Various bodies of the United Nations actually came up with their themes. But we are working directly with the United Nations Office Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And the theme that body has is freedom, equity, and justice for all.
Okay.
Freedom, equity, and justice for all. The other theme is also up because people are running with it and they are working with it. But since we have chosen where to pitch our tent, which is the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, we are working with them.
So you said freedom, equity,
equity,
justice,
and justice for all. And justice for all. So that's the team we are working with this year. We can work with any team, but the team that is globalized is the team we are working with. Most nations, first world nations, very advanced nations of the world, they pay lip service to human rights. They hold countries that don't have powers to fight them accountable for human rights, but they cannot hold themselves responsible. The United States, for instance, is the greatest abuser of human rights, and they claim to be the world policeman, and they tend to say, oh, we protect institutions. I agree that institutions in the US are stronger and better than the ones we have in Africa. But I hold them responsible. They're the largest corporates. If you talk of environmental pollution, climate change, because these are human rights issues, you talk about depletion of the ozone layer, emission of very dangerous and harmful gas to the atmosphere, you hold the United States and other advanced countries responsible. They are the ones also shouting and saying that, oh, greener energy, energy that will help. But the cars, it will surprise you that in Europe, vehicles produced in 2016 are not driven on their roads again because of the emission of gas. And they are trying to cut down on air pollution in their side, but they package those cars and dump in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, we still drive cars that were manufactured in 1970-something. And the pollutants from the exhaust is so heavy that you even see them every day on African roads, on Uyo roads, on Nigerian roads, on Uyo roads. where they emit so much carbon monoxide, so much carbon monoxide, and there's this other one that was discovered recently in the COP, in the COP28 conference going on in Dubai right now. A researcher came out and mentioned, is it nitrate? I've forgotten, but there's a gas which is more harmful than even carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide, you feel it, the smell is so foul and so suffocating, but the other one is there. So what I'm trying to say is that these nations are very responsible, or more responsible for human rights abuse. But in Africa, one of the things I think we should do is hold our government responsible by asking questions. You ask the questions that will make them sit up. And when you quarrel with, you disagree rather, not quarrel, with an authority within Nigeria, they will believe that they are the supreme authority here. But when you drag them outside Nigeria to where the eyes of big nations will look at them and tell them, no, you are not complying with this, they will sit up. So internationalize the fight, internationalize the question asking, internationalize the agitation. That will bring them to their knees.
Okay, so now let's bring it back home. What is the state of human rights in Akwa Ibom State presently, and how can we actually improve upon it? We are in a new administration, a governor who seems to understand the language of the people, but human rights condition in Akwa Ibom and how it can be improved upon.
Well, human rights conditions in Akwa Ibom has been deteriorating. It's been nosediving. I must use this opportunity to commend Governor Moino. Governor Moino, he has been insulted several times. People have written very negative things about him. And he has not come out, or his wife come out, to arrest anybody and accuse you. You can even call him, you can call him a thief, you can call him any name. The man is such a very human rights conscious person. He leaves you to God. But that does not mean that you must abuse him, insult him, or take his rights off, because if his rights is abused, we will be the first to fight for him. He doesn't need to ask us. The law says we can step in even without any invitation. So Governor Moino has been very tolerant. That I give to him. And we want to say a very big thank you to him for not reacting. But he has been responding. And his response has been very positive. He will seek to know what is really happening. I want to go further to thank the Commissioner of Police at Akwa Ibom State Command. That man, I don't know how he got through him, but he's been a lawyer for 23 years. He was here in Akwa Ibom before and moved on to becoming commissioner when he was sent here. That man, from my personal experience and observation, if your right is abused, you take it to that man, to the Commissioner of Police, especially the PPRO also of the state, to Diko Madon. They will take that issue up. When you establish the fact that you paid money to any policeman, he will also take it up. So for that, I would say there's an improvement somehow in human rights. But human rights abuses every day, takes place every day. It takes place between husband and wife beaters, husband biters. It takes place between the man and the side chick. Even slave queens, they have rights. These rights must be protected. Children, the rights of children have been overtly abused. Gender-based rights have been abused. And economic rights have been abused. Where your take-home pay cannot take you home is an abuse of your rights, economic rights.
But to that end, is there anything that people can actually do beyond the agitations and conversations that they can have?
It starts from education. It progresses to agitation. And agitation will draw the attention of those who should execute it to the structure that exists, the law that exists, the conventions that exist, and they know that they are bound by those laws. It makes them very conscious of that fact and conscionable after, because by conscionable they know that if they don't promote those rights, it becomes a problem to them. The right that is abused today that we condone will someday turn around and come back. It happened to Abiola. It happened to a couple of persons. When you condone the abuse of the right of somebody today, your turn will be tomorrow, because everything is turn by turn.
So just before we wrap up this morning, I'd like to understand when we bring this conversation to the Akwa Ibom human rights community in Akwa Ibom State and the NBA, your human rights committee, what are the events that you have lined up for December 10? Well,
December 10 is a sacrosanct date, and we have lined up a couple of activities. What we're doing now is part of the activities. My colleagues are in other radio stations and other television stations, educating Nigerians, educating Akwa Ibom people. That's one. Number two, on the 9th of this month, which is Saturday, barely 2 days from now, we'll do a human rights walk. And that human rights walk, we're not just confining it to the two organizations. We're also collaborating on that walk with the National Human Rights Commission. And a couple of other NGOs will join us for that ride, for that road walk. We want to educate the masses, we want to talk to people. Now, on the 10th, we'll do enlightenment, public enlightenment in some churches, and have a Thanksgiving service at the St. Stephen's African Church, Ikorokubo Fort, Abak Road, Uyo. We'll have a Thanksgiving service. Then by 11th, which is Monday, we are holding a grand finale on Monday. We'll hold a workshop and we'll have panel discussions. We will, after the workshop, the communique and every other thing, we will hold the first of its kind human rights clinical service, where people whose rights have been abused will come and you meet a help desk officer, you complain to him. We have a large retinue of pro bono lawyers who are ready. All the lawyers in MBUU branch, they are very proactive, they are ready to work, they are ready to offer services, because service to humanity is our first watchword, to protect human rights and to ensure we get justice. So we'll do it, and it will go beyond that day. Okay. So these are just the 3 days we have scheduled to hold our programs, but the program actually goes beyond those 3 days. All right, thank you very much, Barrister Clifford Thomas. Oh, I forgot, sorry. No problem. We are giving awards and appreciating the contributions of some persons. Okay. And one of them is Mr. Tony Afia. And he broke the jinx and the monopoly of communications, public communications in Akwa Ibom. And today we're having multiple media, radio stations, television stations, coming up to follow that groundbreaking trust of Mr. Tony Afia. So we want to appreciate him and celebrate him. All right, thank you so much for recognizing the inputs of the chairman of TAF Media Group, owner of Spectrum Television, Planet Radio, and Tangsio FM. Of course, this morning we've been speaking to Barrister Clifford Thomas, coordinator Akwa Ibom Human Rights Community, and Secretary NBA Uyo Human Rights Committee. Conversations around the upcoming December 10 International Human Rights Day. Of course, very strong education we've had this morning. You need to piggyback all the way to our social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrumtvlive.ng and on our YouTube channel, Spectrum Television, for you to get a handful scoop of all the education that our guest has brought to us on the show this morning. Thank you very much for coming on the show. A pleasure is mine. We invite you and let us know when your rights are abused. Absolutely. We will get up and fight for you. Of course, first of its kind clinical service will be held by the human rights community in Akwa Ibom State on the 11th of December. You can always call our phone lines and we'll furnish you with more details. My name is Uyai Aneken, and that's the much we can take on Rise and Shine this Thursday morning. Thank you for being a part of our community. Let's see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.